Hello and welcome to this week's edition of You Should Have Been Here Last Week, the podcast in which myself and fellow comic Paul Ricketts interview the many and varied denizens of the UK comedy promoting scene and ask them such searching questions of how do you do it, why do you do it, and of course, when are you going to book me? This week's guest is, I think he's got 18 clubs all over the place, all over the country under the guise of Barnstormers Comedy. It's Kevin Precious.
Yes, Kevin Precious, from Hull to the South Coast, which is some spread.
Yeah, it is. And he used to be a teacher as well. A religious studies teacher.
Hence, he looks like Jesus.
He does a bit, actually, yeah. And I should imagine he said the word Jesus many, many times when a comic has rung him up and his car's broken down, or she's, had an emergency, or they just can't be bothered.
Yeah, he's probably even asked for divine intervention.
Why? Why me? He has been at it a long time, hasn't he? Well over 20 years now, I think.
Of course, there was his first coming, then his second coming. I think I'm pushing this Jesus thing too far.
Yeah,
I mean, it's time to stop. Yeah. Roll away the stone. Let's just get this over. This morning, we have as our guest is Kevin Precious, proprietor of Barnstormers Comedy, and you've got gigs all across the country. I think you've been running them for over 20 years?
I guess the longest serving is Horsham, which is 2004. But yeah, I've been doing the promoting for a while on and off. And as you suggest, actually, they're a mixed bag. We did have one in Bromsgrove at the old Artrix for a while, but that went. I've got one in Bromsgrove now, which is at a lovely bar, but they tend to be southern based, and then a couple in the north where I've since relocated.
Yeah, there's not many promoters that have gigs all over England. I think you're one of the few I could possibly, in fact, you might be the only one I could think of outside major chains.
I suppose quite a lot of promoters are fairly localised, aren't they? I mean, I could think of something like Mirth, if you like, Jeff's setup, where there's gigs here, there and everywhere, but it's kind of more on a freelance basis as opposed to what I do, which is part of the co-promotion. I co-promote it with the venue, so it's a slightly different setup, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, and you also MC a lot of them, which I know that Jeff at Mirth Control also MCs, but there's a lot of open spots who are chasing him around the country to find out he doesn't actually perform at a lot of the places he's billed to perform at.
So they get the break they're looking for, yes. That's I do MC them, that presents certain challenges. I have done a lot recently because coming back after the pandemic. It's a bit weird, sort of like not gigging for the best part of 18 months and then getting back into it and thinking, I don't really feel like I'm in the same place.
Yeah, why did you become a comedy promoter? What made you want to do it? I
wasn't full-time as a comic. My previous artistic endeavours had extended to music, which I know has got something in common with both of you. And I actually trained to be a teacher. I'd started doing comedy earlier, but I didn't want to sort of throw my entire lot in with it. So what I did is I started promoting gigs, also as sort of co-promotions with Stephen Newbury. You probably both remember that. So that I had access to stage time and could keep a hand in as far as the comedy community was concerned within my own sort of immediate vicinity. There was a lot of caution at first because having been a musician, I felt like I needed to, get my life on track first before I started.
What's the first one that you had then? Is it Horsham then, the first actual gig that you had?
I did. I went into Seaford. I was living in Brighton, and life was kind of like I just started teaching, and things were in a state of flux. And I was aware of Seaford, and I thought, I'm just going to go to Seaford because my mum had lived there. So I went into Seaford, went to the tourist information, and they pointed me in the direction of Stephen Newbury's estate agent and said, that guy sells all the tickets for local events, and we have got a theatre. And we started a gig at the Seaford Barn Theatre. He started it. I was a gun for hire. And then we decided we'd like to expand the idea further. I mean, I actually had an established promoter. So I said to the guy, I'm doing a gig in Seaford, and he just pretty much laughed in my face. And but then very quickly, me and Stephen sort of developed a rapport and decided we were going to do stuff elsewhere as well. The Seaford one was pretty much a success straight away. Seaford Barn Theatre, hence the name, Barnstormers. And then Chichester, we were sort of like trying things in Sussex more generally. And then at Horsham was the first art centre we got, and then that's kind of been the remit ever since, really.
Yeah. I mean, have you got any tips that you'd give for aspiring from, because, do's and don'ts?
I mean, it's endless. The promotion is endless. You cannot take your foot off the gas in terms of promotion.
Yeah.
Because there's other stuff people want to do. There's other comedy stuff keeps surfacing. And people have very short memories, even if they have the most amazing night at your club. I mean, I personally put out posters and flyers still in those areas. So that's, that's a bit of a commitment. And that's somewhat less glamorous than hanging out with the comedians and what have you. The other thing as well is I would say have some respect for the acts. You see a lot of people getting a bit la-di-da sometimes on the pro comedies thing. These are the acts who've played this, so this is the standard we expect. And there's a constant sort of feeling that the promoter's placing themselves slightly above the act. And not in all cases, but I prefer to think as you're working with. So, just have some respect for the acts and their skills base and the fact that it's quite a hard thing. Because I'm also an act, obviously, as you know, so I know the flip side of it as well,
Yeah, I mean, what you just said about the relentlessness of it, it kind of applies to, to acts as well, in the sense that now we're all required to be our own promoters, aren't we? Every day.
The social media age. Bizarrely, you could put out a tweet, and I would say more often than not, the acts don't do anything with it.
What do you wish you knew before you started?
I wasn't wet behind the ears when I started, so I mean, it's I suppose what I know that I didn't know is just how intense it is in terms of promoters. They're another species again, I suppose, in the same way that acts are. And I suppose there is overall more ego involved than there is if you just maybe go and work in, I don't want to deride anything, but maybe you go and work in Morrison's or something. I think it's just there's a lot of ego involved, and I kind of knew that because I've been hovering around the fringes of the music scene. But
is it like? I mean, is it the sense that cause sometimes acts can be like that with each other? There's a bit of rivalry going on, or do promoters talk amongst themselves and say, "Oh, I heard so and so."
Promoters aren't privy to the same conversations because they don't hang around in dressing rooms and go on car journeys together. So you don't get promoter conversations. What you get a sense of is that somebody's set up maybe, a couple of blocks away from you. And while that you could argue the usefulness of that two ways, sometimes you can create a comedy vibe in a place that hitherto didn't have one, and then they've got two choices, or you can suggest it's counterproductive. But you don't tend to have those conversations because promoters don't have as much access to each other as acts do.
I agree with you that they are sometimes more eccentric than the acts are.
Yeah, a bit of megalomania. The idea that, I see that famous phrase, I think it's ascribed to Napoleon, isn't it? England is a nation of shopkeepers.
Yes.
It's very much like that. Very much like that. Each with his own little patch. And
you feel quite proprietal about it then?
If you've got 8 or 9 gigs, slightly less so. But if you've got one gig, right, then the chances are somebody else comes along. You're probably quite proprietorial because you not only invest your money, you invest your ego. It's one of those things. I suppose if you're at some kind of archetype dinner party situation and you get introduced as a new boyfriend or something, and what do? Oh, I promote comedy. I mean, you you can ramp it up a bit, can't you? You know, I mean, I can't be bothered. It's because it's like doing a bloody routine. You've got stock phrases. Do you know what I mean? You just end up sort of parroting all this bollocks that's been going around in your head for the last 20 odd years. You know, but I just want it to work. I just want the audience to have a good time and feel like the audience have had a good time.
Have you ever had that situation where someone's done that to you? Opened a club like, you know, a couple of 100 yards down the road, or so near as it's taking the piss?
Well, yeah, same building.
Oh, where was that?
Well, I mean, I'm not privy to say at the moment, but people.
Oh, right, okay.
But it seems to work. Sometimes the argument goes the other way, and you can have more than one effect. I've had people sort of suggest to me they didn't particularly like me being in the same vicinity as them.
Is that just generally?
Yeah, well, it could be. Yeah, what do you do? I mean, I'm sort of, broadly speaking, left of centre, but just give them a lecture on free market economics.
Yeah.
Which is essentially what it is. It's very much free market economics in the raw, albeit at the level of, you know, we're not talking great conglomerates here. We're talking things ownership or whatever it is. You know.
Yeah. Could you describe your typical audience? Have you got an idea in your head of what they are?
They range really. I mean, they're probably fairly settled, 30 and something and above, middle-aged. I mean, I had the conversation the other week with somebody that, I mean, there's a lot of people of a certain age, you know, let's say 50 and above, and you do get them 50s and 60s, something, and all very welcome, do have what we used to call disposable income, you know. I feel sorry for the younger people because it does seem as though every penny they have either goes off to paying some debt or other, be it a student loan or making the rent each month.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
I mean, I'm middle-aged-ish, so that does reflect in the audience. You know?
Yeah. Do you often think that comedy clubs do reflect the promoter in some way? Do you think there's anything in that?
I think they're more likely to reflect the compere, actually. I think the promoter, let's say I wasn't a performer and I installed a 20-something, 30-something compere, yeah, it's kind of like you reflect your audience a little bit, yeah. So,
I have to disagree with that, seeing that I'm a compere, and a lot of the time I'm staring at a room of people who are definitely not anything like me. Class-wise, yes, they might be, but in other ways, nothing like me at all.
I mean, where have you compared recently?
Friday, I'm in Kent emceeing.
Which is handy because you live in Kent, don't you?
Indeed. So in that respect, you are correct.
Well, I mean, I always thought Kent, actually, this is kind of how misguided I was. I mean, I won't get too much into the B word, but I always thought Kent would be the most enlightened place in relation to its proximity to Europe. So I thought, these guys are going to be pro-Europe.
Turns out the exact opposite is true. Yeah.
You know, the naive thought on my part.
Yeah, I think we forget how well travelled we are. Because when you talk to people that are not involved in this world, and you say where you've been, and they're just sort of going, "Where? You travel what? 300 miles this weekend?" Because most people don't, do they? They don't travel a lot.
Well, I remember Mark Losera said a funny thing, and he said, if somebody said to you, "There's 200 quid on a bar in Plymouth, it's yours if you're prepared to drive there," and you just go, "No chance." There as well. You'd be straight in the car. So, I mean,
it's true. Yeah. What changes have you seen over the years you've been promoting? What changes in comedy? And that kind of leads on to the next question, as in, you know, what do you think is going to happen?
A lot more people doing it. A lot less. I suppose in that way it's slightly more demystified. There's, it's not that difficult a thing to set up a gig. It's more of a thing to maintain it. You know, that's the trick. But yeah, if you pay the acts fairly promptly, then that's one way to sustain what you're doing. The minute that stops happening, you know, the antipathy is quite considerable. I would say, in keeping with comedy generally, it seems a lot more mainstream generally, the sort of things. You see it actually when, like occasionally in Guardian articles or something, when Stuart Lee talks about the 80s, which I wasn't privy to. And you've got all these people who couldn't do anything else, and they're all like completely bonkers and got these uniquely interesting acts. I don't know, you were around at that time, Steve.
I was, yeah.
I think it's quite homogenized, really, and I think the same with promoting. Really, there's not. There's preferences. People will obviously go and see an act we've seen on one of the panel shows on the TV. But where do I see it going? I don't know. Never. Who was it said? Never predict anything, especially the future. So, what I've noticed recently, which I thought was really good, and a really excellent example of sort of bypassing any notion of gatekeepers, be they promoters, be they people who run, big agents, TV, whatever, with somebody like Mark Simmons with his TikTok following and his ability to build a tour schedule out of his own endeavours. I thought that was excellent. I think Mark's great. He's not only a great actor, he's also a great guy when you sort of see and meet up with him. And I think if more guys like that sort of are able to control their own situation like that, then I think that's one of the positives for sure. Age is a factor. Given that I'm speaking to people who are contemporaneous with me.
Yeah. I mean, but do you think that the live comedy scene is it seems to be, after a sort of hiatus of when it came back, last year, it was a bit tentative, but it seems to be gathering up steam again. And I'm hearing lots of reports of clubs of fuller, and
I didn't have such a great autumn as a promoter,
right?
But January and February have been pretty good so far. So there is, but you would anticipate that if they weren't, we'd know there was a problem. There's quite much misery, of course, and therefore the winter months are invariably the most productive. Can I see it continuing? I don't know. I'm sort of slightly cautious when it comes to sort of thinking in terms of boom periods. I've been around for a while, and the consistent thing has really been to make sure that I've tried to maintain a standard in terms of like sort of gig the acts would want to play and the sort of gig the audience would want to come to. I think if you do that, there's a good, and obviously put in the effort, there's a greater than average chance that you will stay around. But whether you'll be part of any emerging sensibility, I don't really know. I've always just gone and sort of done my own thing anyway. I tend to take sort of things out of the sort of music thing I did prior to it. So I always see myself as sort of like a little indie label or something, just getting on with it, beavering away, and hopefully doing, just trying to maintain a level of quality whilst, keep my head above water at the same time.
So what do you think makes a good comedy night? What's the important ingredients?
Well, you've got to get variation in the acts. Don't always succeed because you haven't always got the options. Ideally, styles and diversity in terms of male, female, people of colour, LGBTQ. Probably missed the letter out, A plus whatever, and disability as well. Actually, there's quite a lot of comedians out there who have a disability and that have got something interesting to say. Yeah, variation. You don't always get it. Sometimes you do get three blokes moaning. I think 10, 15 years ago, three blokes moaning, nobody would have batted an eyelid. But I think now there's possibly a greater expectation that there'll be some variation in the bill.
Do you know what, Kevin? That's almost like a marketing idea in itself, isn't it? Someone just get hold of it, just go, a comedy night, three blokes moaning, and just a chain of comedy clubs all over the world.
Just forget about the clubs. This is what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
It's more meta than you think it is.
But it is. It's, unless you've got people who do one-liners where it's obviously wordplay, the minute it goes into the sort of like the more narrative, observational type thing, it's discomfort, isn't it? It's moaning reframed as humour. It's not.
But moaning for money that's why you go 200 miles to pick up that 200 quid.
Well, that much. No, but I'm going to get my ego stroked.
Yeah. I want to project my misery onto a group of people.
Misery for money. Yeah.
What advice would you give to comics that want to play your clubs? How should they approach you, if at all?
By all means, just approach me, send me some content. What I do is I tend to, if I don't respond, that means either it's not working or it's not ready or anything. But what I don't do, because I've had it myself from promoters, is I don't give them the third degree and the almighty thing of like, what I think you should do this, your comedy's like this. And I just think, it's like if you don't want to book anybody anymore, it's the opposite scenario. Just do it quietly. If you chat to acts in the audience, in the dressing room, as an act sometimes, and they say, he said this to me, or they said that to me about my act, and this is why they're not booking me. And actually, all you do is you create a problem for yourself as well, because the next, you want to book that person, but you've created resentment in the process. So anybody's welcome to send. If I respond, then that's probably a positive. But if I don't, it doesn't mean the door isn't still open. So
what happens if someone asks you for feedback, which is I hate when people ask you for feedback.
Something in me dies, quite frankly.
Just turn the amp up. There's a bit of feedback.
I look like your dad. Right. Do you know what I mean? No, it's a fairly immediate response. If you've got a stack of laughs off the audience and provided you're not hateful, the chances are I'd probably say, yeah, that was great. What can I say? Do you know what I mean? But I can tell you so many instances of act myself where some clever clogs promoter has given you a stack and you think, what's your qualification?
Well, the way I see it, I suppose anyone is an expert judge on comedy. Audience sits there, they don't have to pass a test to get in the door, do they? They make a judgment by laughing or not. So in a way, anyone's allowed to judge comedy. That's what makes it different from acting.
The other thing as well, the classic is where, with promoters, where you absolutely cane it and you have a blinding gig. And then you never get another booking.
Oh, yes. Would you book an act if they absolutely stormed it, but you find it very hard to get on with them?
But yeah, if it's financially expedient, yes, but you just invite them to get there a bit later, don't you, before the stage?
That was diplomacy at its best, that was.
You don't have to engage with that. So what's your stage time, It's 11 minutes past 9. Right.
A volatile set of individuals, aren't we?
Indeed, yeah, it's very tempting because I've always been on the front foot in terms of like telling people what I think is correct. But, keep people on board, really. And actually try and be genuine. I'm not just saying that's a calculated thing. If somebody does well, let them know,
Yeah.
So if somebody doesn't do very well, I suppose what I've learned overall is you don't have to ramp your ego up every 5 minutes. You can.
So, what's the best performance you've seen in your comedy club?
I'm going to say me.
That was an open goal. That was.
Yeah, despite everything I've just said. There's been so many. It's impossible to list because a lot of them just go on their own merits anyway.
Well, last one then. Who was the last one who ripped it up?
Last one I saw. I haven't worked with Kane Brown before Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's very good. Yeah.
I want a better word. He turned in a real performance.
He's the best smelling comedian. You hug Kane and you walk away smelling better than when you when you went up to him.
It's very fragrant, isn't he?
He's a lovely smelling man. That's what
right. Okay. Well, I haven't seen him at one of ours until over the weekend. Yes, definitely. Dan Evans was on with you. He was slightly problematic member of the audience. They said, "You're not very good. I'm going to the bar." And Dan said, "Well, don't let me stop you."
Well, we're gonna have to leave it there. Thank you for.
Thanks, Kev. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, brilliant. I've enjoyed it.
So that was Kevin Precious, and a very funny and interesting interview that was.
Yes. Yeah.
With his fantastic modesty. That's the best comic he's ever seen, is himself. And who would argue with that?
Enjoyed that, though.
Yes, it was good. We'll move on now to the comedian's lexicon phrase of this episode, and it's going to be, "They've always been nice to me." And let me explain that.
Yes, you better explain that. Yeah.
So, any comic, well, when they might end up having a discussion about a promoter who hasn't paid them, or perhaps even another comic who they don't get on with, or anything to do with comedy, any particular person, and there might be someone spilling their guts about how badly treated they've been by this particular person in question, some other comic will always say, be it in a car or on social media, suddenly some other person will say, "Well, they've always been nice to me."
Yeah. Thereby showcasing the innate self-obsession of most comedians.
Yeah.
But they'd probably even say it about Jack the Ripper, wouldn't they?
Of course they would.
I know he murdered a lot of people, but, I'll say as I find, and he was always been very nice to me. Yeah,
He was fine with me.
Yeah.
He was lovely.
Burke and Hare, they gave me quite a few gigs in the Edinburgh area, and I can't complain.
Yeah.
I mean, most of them were dead. Most of the audience were dead, but, come on. What are you going to do? It is very true. I mean, we've had that very recently on our own circuit, haven't we? Because of, and it applies to acts as well, with the famous case of a person that's going to go to prison and has been convicted of various offences. And we can't really name them because people guess who they are. So,
just like a nonce.
Yeah, his name's T. Nonce. Yeah, but exactly the same. People saying, that's the other side of the coin, though, weren't they? Because people were then going, "Oh yes, there was always something dodgy about him." I knew about 15 years ago there was something not right about him. It was just bullshit, isn't it?
Well, of course. I mean, I like people either say they mention the evil eyes or something completely random, like well, brown brogue shoes. I always knew he was dodgy because of that. Yeah, drove a Peugeot. Left hand
like
drive.
those. But it's like those things after a murder when they interview all the neighbours, isn't it? Yes, well, he kept himself to himself. He would have. And then there will be one neighbour who says, "Well, I don't know. He may have gone mad with a semi-automatic rifle, but he's very nice to me."
He's wrong. Yeah, well, I always liked him.
Always liked him. Yeah,
So that is. They've always been nice to me. So that's the end of this particular episode of the podcast. And as always, I will say, if you watch this on YouTube, then subscribe. In the description, you can buy us a coffee or just send us money willy-nilly if you wish. We accept all willy-nillys. If you want to send them to us, please do.
Yes. Actually, so that's going to replace backs, isn't it, in the future? Willy-nilly.
Yes, willy-nilly.
Willy-nilly to follow. May take 4 months. I thought willy-nilly was instantaneous. Oh, no.
Oh, it takes a bit of time, willy-nilly.
Willy-nilly. Oh, God.
He's got to build up to it. He's got to get the will and then the nilly.
Oh, dear.
And also those people who are downloading the podcast, please tell your friends. And if you've got any suggestions about people that you want us to interview or subjects you'd like us to discuss or even words to add to our lexicon of comedic words, please go ahead and contact us. So this is the end of the episode, which we are dedicating in the memory of Gareth Richards, who was a lovely comic who recently died in a tragic accident and will be much missed on the circuit. So this one's for you, Gareth. Yeah. And we'll see you on the next one.
They said you should have been here last week. I swear you should have been here last week.